Hello guys and welcome to the Welsh Rugby Roundup show here with myself, Brandon Smith, and I'm joined by Rhian Nowell-Phillps. Rhian, how are you doing?
I'm fine, really excited for this. This is fantastic, isn't it? First show, we seem to have lost Joe for a bit, but yeah, here he is.
Here he is, the man of the hour. Here he is, Chief Bloke, Big Joe Shep.
And because I completely messed up, the reason it's all that first show nerves and everything, completely right, a whole scripted show, a curated content, the fancy producers would call it, and then completely forgot to stick myself in the studio to say quick quote. There we go. It is only up here. Is it Croeso? Is that right? Welcome.
Yes, perfect.
There you go. I've even put Welsh on for my Welsh friends tonight. For those of you watching for the first time who may not have seen us before, I am Big Joe Shep. I am founder and chief bloke at the Three Blokes, a Ball BOD Group of shows. I'm actually monitoring the show here, but I can take that out for now. I'm absolutely delighted. I'm only here with you for 2 minutes just to say a quick hello and a huge thank you to Rhian Nowell-Phillps and to Brandon Smith for helping put this together. As you know, there's a Facebook page now, and a huge thank you to the 10,000 people who watched the opening intro, a couple of minutes of myself, Brandon, and Rhian sort of having a bit of a chat about what this is all about. The whole emphasis on this is for us to look once a month at all aspects of Welsh rugby, similar as we do on the other shows, the Springbok and South African, the Leinster, the Ulster, Keegan Big Joe show, and the Three Blokes show. So looking at all aspects of rugby from grassroots, up to international level, and we'll be looking at mainstream and non-mainstream. So as the monthly shows go on and develop, it will be reviewing games that the regions have played. We will be looking at previewing games coming up. We'll be covering the Premiership. We'll cover a little bit on that tonight about where the passion and the drive and everything comes from. We'll be looking at wheelchair. We'll be welcome to Mark Tin and the team from Evervale Wheelchair Sports and Social Club tonight as well, by the way. We will be looking at deaf, we'll be looking at visually impaired, we'll be looking at tag, we'll be looking at women and sevens, and every aspect of Welsh rugby, both inwards and downwards and upwards and outwards, where it sits on the international stage and what has made Wales such a international success over the last 10 or 15 years. Why, people like me didn't know this, but the Premiership, not the English Premiership, the Welsh Premiership, which is the level down, if you like, from the Pro 14, from the regionals, why that's massively supported and hugely successful. And we're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. So I'm going to drop out now and I'm going to leave it all. So you'll see me from time to time. Joe Lyons, good evening. Desmond Cusker, good evening. Gregory Galway, as ever. You're all welcome to the show. We have got a couple of great guests on tonight, and we've got a couple of other guests on who are also great, but they're covering regions and Premiership and all sorts of stuff. If you want to be on the show, this is a fan show. If you want to be on the show, then contact Brandon or Rhian or contact one of the team. In fact, the Welsh Rugby Roundup show, the Dragons Balls, you know why that was called that one, we have got our own Instagram account. We've got our own Twitter account. Brandon, thank you for setting those up as well. I'm going to go off to dot down to produce now and leave Brandon and Rhian to start to cover the show. You'll see me as the next 12 months goes on, but if you want something to speak about, if you want to come on and chat about Welsh rugby, if you want us to cover a topic, then get in touch with the team. We will do. And I'm chuffed to add another show to the Three Blokes, a Ball BOD Group. Thank you very much. I have to put this, otherwise you're going to speak to me again. He is from Cardiff. He is my brother from another mother, Dave Williams. How are you, brother? And there we go. I'm going to drop down. Please put it together for the Welsh Wizardess, as I like to call it, Rhian Nowell-Phillps, and from Brandon Smith, rugby in his own right. It is Brandon Smith, your hosts and leads for the latest show in the Three Blokes of Ball BOD Group, the Welsh Rugby Roundup show, the Dragons Balls. Take it away, lads.
Finally, a bit of peace and quiet, eh, Rhian?
Yeah, bloody Irish, get everywhere.
Yeah, that's it. You know, we the Welsh know how to do it best. And welcome to the show. It's our first show. We're so excited to have you with us. As always, if you're watching here live on Facebook, on YouTube, subscribe on the channel, like the Facebook page. And today, we really want to give you the basics behind Welsh rugby, about how Welsh rugby is where it is at today. Obviously, Wales, we were #1 ranked in the world for that very short time, but we certainly were. And we want to cover all aspects of Welsh rugby, and hopefully we're going to do that for you this evening. We do want to start to talk a little bit about the history of the game here in Wales, because rugby is very old in this country. It's very steeped in tradition. People are very connected to their local clubs, as you will know, Rhian, as I will know here. anything that's really going on in the community tends to happen in the rugby club, doesn't it, Rhian?
Oh, absolutely, and it's still very much the community led, isn't it? The local rugby club and the club themselves tend to get involved with other local, well, in our area down here. Machan Rugby Club gets involved with the show, our local agricultural show. It's the rugby club is probably one of the only bars we have left in our little village. So it is really part of the community. And what's great as well is even it doesn't matter, does it, what level you are. The international guys still go back to their roots and their local clubs, no matter where they end up, and I think that's really, really important. And we've seen that when over the years when we've had international players from all over the world come to Wales to live. Falatau, for example, the Vinipolas, they've just lived in Wales and been part of the community and still fondly think of Wales as just being a totally rugby mad nation. But I found out today that rugby came to Wales in 1850, and
wow.
Apparently it was the Reverend Professor Roland Williams who brought the game from Cambridge University to St David's College in Lampeter, and that was the first rugby team was developed there. The actual WRU, as we know, it wasn't established until 1881, and in fact that was also the year of the first international game in Wales. And one thing I did know was the oldest rugby club, and still is the oldest rugby club in Wales, is Neath, or the Welsh All Blacks, who were actually founded in 1871. So that, we always think, or I think, perhaps because of my background, that the golden age of rugby was the 1970s in Wales. But actually, if you look back in history, the first golden age of Welsh rugby was in very early 1900s, end of the 1800s and 1900s, where we won several Grand Slams and Triple Crowns, both within when France came in and before that. And then it all went then because, as we know, totally different to anywhere else in the world. Welsh rugby was based on the heavy industries, the coal mines, the steel industry. They were the ones that spawned the big rugby players, the big boys team. They worked together underground. They worked together as a rugby team, and so we have that working class background for rugby, which perhaps you don't see in other countries. It's not synonymous with the sort of public schools, and so in the 1920s, after the war, during the war and the First World War, the Great War, the coal mining industry was absolutely booming. But once we got into the Depression, of course, there was no money. People couldn't afford to go to rugby. The coal mines were all closing, and so that was when they started to take the shilling to go north to rugby league. And I come from on one side of the family mining stock, and I can remember still my grandfather. Sort of people wouldn't talk to people who went up north to rugby league. And it was seen as something when you realise that they were offered money in a time of Great Depression, and you couldn't blame them. But it remained a stigma for a long time in Wales itself. And so, yeah. So, and another claim to fame, of course, was in 1905. Tom Williams, which was the name of my grandfather, but sadly it wasn't him who did it, suggested that the Welsh national anthem be sung as a response to the haka when they played New Zealand, and that's where it started, and that's why we sing the Welsh, the national anthems before a rugby game. I still think perhaps we should sing it after the haka, but there we are. That's for another debate, another day, I think.
And the Welsh anthem for us is is so important, and I'm sure the next two guests who are going to jump in with us have beautiful voices. I'm first going to introduce you to Nathan Parker. He started his own podcast called Don't Give a Fuck. It's fantastic. He's had incredible guests on the podcast. Worth a listen, absolutely. Nathan, welcome to the show. How are you doing, mate?
Oh, what an introduction. I was going to say that was the best history lesson I've ever been to.
There you go. We got a history teacher here today. We got a history teacher. You don't need to go to school, kids. Just talk to the Welsh Wizardess. She's got you sorted.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast? How did it come about? And about some of the incredible guests you've had on there?
Yeah, well, my first thing, I don't want to name drop. I'm not one of these people that name drops. Sean Fitzpatrick.
I've never heard of him. Who is he?
But, I've had 2 failed podcasts. I've just graduated as a sports journalist a month ago, getting through COVID somehow. Like Shane Williams sidestepping everything that come our way, but managed to get it in the end. And after 2 failed podcasts, I thought, I'll decide to go on my own and created a rugby podcast. And it's not as easy as it looks. You sort of message about 500 people involved in rugby and see how it goes, and I was lucky to have about 4 or 5 replies, and then it just went from there. And obviously it's almost like the snowball effect. Then people start seeing who you've gone on, and they're going, oh yeah, I quite like that bloke.
It sounds fantastic. I've had a listen to so many of your podcasts, mate. I absolutely love them. It's so fascinating to hear from not just current players, but also past players about how rugby's changed. And yeah, anyone listening to this, if you're a fan of world rugby, not just Welsh rugby, definitely check it out. We're going to bring our next guest in. He is started a really exciting podcast looking at an area of the game which has such history here in Wales. It's so important in the Welsh game, and obviously before 2005 it's what we knew as rugby here in Wales. It is Tobias. He has started a new podcast called the Welsh Premiership Podcast with his friend Tobias. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Evening all, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you for coming on, mate.
Cheers. So basically I started this podcast called the Welsh Premiership Podcast with 2 course mates. Actually, I'm in the middle of the same course Nathan's graduated from. Doing sports journalism, and basically we decided on creating the podcast because we thought there was a gap in the market in Welsh rugby. The Premiership's followed by thousands of fans and people across Wales, and we feel as if it didn't get enough coverage, media aspects, and nothing that it deserved. So we started off in a little room in our university, and obviously COVID's kicked in, and we've moved down from home, had a few guests on, and it's going well.
It sounds fantastic as well, and it's really interesting to hear about the Welsh Premiership, something that maybe, not saying I'm extremely young, but maybe younger than some other Welsh rugby fans. I don't really remember the Premiership that much because obviously in Wales, it's like football. Football doesn't exist outside the Premier League, does it? So, it's about, as you said, Tobias, there's a gap in the market there. It's interesting as well, as it's so important in the structure of rugby here in Wales. We had a history lesson from Rhian, of course. I do want to ask an interesting question to you guys, though. We'll go with Nathan first. Do you remember your first rugby match that you ever went to watch in Wales? It might be your local club. It might be Wales as your first, which was very lucky if it was, or it might be a regional side. Can you tell us a little bit about your first game?
Yeah, well, the first game I can remember was 2005, actually going to the Millennium Stadium, and it was the Welsh Cup back then, which was called the Connacht Minolta Cup, I think. And I think probably played Panellists in the final. And first game, I had the scarf. I remember my dad coming up to me when I was about 8 or 9 saying, what sport do you want to play? Almost like pushing me towards rugby. And for some reason, because I like rounders, I said cricket. But he said, no, you're playing rugby. You're playing rugby. I could have ended up on a different podcast. But, I remember that game, and Ponty were, I think, 24-8 up at half time. And I goes to my dad, we've won this now. And the final score is Panellists 25, Ponty 24. And I left the stadium crying. And my dad said, that's the last game I ever take you to.
Well, that was an interesting game, that's for sure. Tobias, do you remember your first game, mate?
Well, my first ever game rugby, I think, is from my local team, Brinkethin, at the age of 6. But I do remember going to the Millennium Stadium in 2008 for Wales vs Italy Grand Slam year, and God, I must have been about 6 or 7. But so I remember, I think it was a ball Tom Shanklin 50-yard try, and that's the only bad thing I can remember.
I think my first game was Italy, 2010. Maybe I live right at the top of Wales. You know, we like rugby does exist up here somehow. And I remember going down the train all the way to Cardiff to watch us play against Italy. And Italy at the time were going through this weird phase of having lots of overseas players and having lots of overseas players playing the number 10 position. And they had an Aussie-born player playing at number 10. I remember he dropped a drop goal in the first 5 minutes. Thought, oh no, we're going to lose to Italy here. This is not good in my first game. But we went on to win very comfortably. Rhian, you're just as young as us. Do you remember?
I'm going back to Cardiff half days, to be honest.
What's that?
Yeah, there was some people who are listening might remember the infamous East Terrace in the Arms Park. It was standing room only, and it was my father didn't want to take us there, but he took my sister and I think we were playing Australia. All I can remember, I couldn't see a thing. We were hanging on the little railing thing. We lost. Wales lost, and there were lots of bottles which once held brown ale, but it was rather yellow by the time they finished it. It was an amazing experience, great singing in those days, I've got to admit. Perhaps lack that sort of, apart from when Wales are doing really well, we don't have the atmosphere of the old terraces used to get. But yeah, happy days.
We've all been so lucky to see rugby in Wales, and I think we will get onto this a little bit later, talking about the passion that the fans have. It's so important, and I think it comes from a lot of different areas, but we are passionate, and as we all know, we're always right, in rugby, like Welsh fans, we are always right. It doesn't matter what anyone says, we are always right. Let's jump on to the structure of the game in Wales. Rhian's going to take this one on about how the structure of the game in Wales, because it is so deep rooted in the community. I'm going to pass over to the intellectual genius that is the Welsh Rugby.
No, I'm just asking you really, the structure, the whole, because Brandon and I were talking about how community-led rugby is, and how important community rugby is to actually sort of acting as we talk about the regional clubs and the feeder clubs, but actually it starts a lot lower than that, doesn't it? And do you think it acts as a stepping stone for the regional teams? How important do you guys think the sort of grassroots rugby from community rugby up, and how important community rugby is as a feeder?
Is that to me?
Yes, Nathan.
Yes,
to you.
I'll take it on. I think it's massively important. Without amateur rugby or without even Premiership rugby, I don't think Wales win the Grand Slams that they have over the last few years. You look at that 2005 Grand Slam side, and that was based on the Celtic Warriors, which we'll talk about later. You look at the Rob Sadolis, Brent Gabanes, Gethin Jenkins, Matthew Rees, who went on to win in 2008. It all starts from the bottom. And, I can only go by my local side, which is Rydfel and RFC. And it's a brotherhood, wherever you're from, we're called the village. And that's what we are. It's the center of the earth. That's the way we see it, sort of thing. But yeah, without those players, you look at Liam Williams. I think he was a bricklayer and he played for his local club, and he didn't come through a conventional way. And I still think there's space and there's time for players coming through those ranks, not just the academies, which again we'll get onto later. But my girlfriend's cousin at the minute is playing for Coleg y Cymoedd. He's just got picked for Coleg y Cymoedd, and he's going to be with the Blues Academy. And I've almost planned his career out for him because I've seen it so many times. And I was like, well, if you're good, you'll play for Coleg y Cymoedd, you'll play for the Cardiff Blues Academy, you might have 1 or 2 games for Ponty or Cardiff, and then you'll go on to play for the Blues and Wales, and that's the way it is. But I still think, the romantic in me still sees a Liam Williams who's playing for the local club and has dreams of playing for Wales.
Yeah. And what about you, Tobias? What do you think about the way that, from community upwards then, how do you think that works for you?
Yeah, as Nathan said, I think it's vital from community grassroots level, like my local club down in Brinkethin. We have a number of clubs down Bridgend Way, but it's so important that the local clubs are stepping stone to a high level. We got the academies, like Nathan said, the regions and all this, but obviously the Premiership level, a lot of players get picked from the local clubs or college rugby to go and play in the semi-pro league. But again, I think that is a vital step between the regions and grassroots level. So I think without that, Welsh rugby would struggle as a whole.
Absolutely. And I think it almost gets to that Premiership level. Well, I think we're going to move on to that soon, isn't it? And it's sort of what happens then between Premiership and regions, isn't it? There's a bit of a gap, especially with the fans and the way that it's perceived in Wales. And, sort of that's quite an interesting discussion as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
From schools rugby as well. Schools rugby is really important, isn't it? It's especially if you're from round Reed Belling, are you, Nathan?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I went to Reed Belling school. Stuff gone now. many moons ago. But the actual, sort of schools competitions, playing rugby at school level. There's a lot of competition. We always find when the football team does well in Wales that the first thing that happens is everyone wants to be Bale, and then more football is played in school. I don't know what it's like with you, Brandon, up North Wales. What is the school game?
It's very different up here. Obviously, I'm so close to Liverpool and Chester and Manchester, so the football ties are very strong. But of course, we'll move on to the Premiership very shortly. But we've got a new team up here, Rugby Gogledd Cymru, North Wales Rugby, RGC, which have been really successful, in fact, and they're really the local hub for bringing talented young players through in the area, and they've done well, and that's really important. They've had good coaches such as Mark Jones, who's at the Scarlets, in charge there, and we've seen that people have really bought into that. Of course, the under-20 side come up to Colwyn Bay, play at Avios Park, or Zip World Stadium, as of course it's officially known, which is not the greatest name, but we'll run with it anyway. But yeah, fans always go. It's always a sellout, even if it's absolutely chucking it down with rain. It's cold, and unfortunately, under 20s, England seem to be decent at it, and we're losing 30 points odd. The fans are still there singing, really getting behind the team. And I think in Wales as a whole, as we've spoken about, community is really the driving force behind rugby, and rugby brings people together. And I don't think that a sport really does that as much as it does as rugby. And the fact that, if you go into a bar anywhere in the world and there's rugby on and you sit next to a guy, he'll buy you a drink by the end of the match, and you'll have bought him a drink by the end of the match, and you've talked about the game, and you may have different opinions on the game, but at the end of the day, you both love rugby, and that's the most important thing. And that's what we're trying to do on the show. We want to get people involved. We want people to put their opinions. We want people to tell us if we're wrong or we're right, because, apparently, allegedly, I've never been wrong before. So I've heard that from a few people, but I'm not one to blow my own trumpet. But we'll bring Tobias in to discuss a bit about the Premiership. The Premiership is so big in Wales. Can you explain to me a little bit about your connection to the Premiership and why you think it's so important that Welsh fans get behind it?
Yeah, well, I'm from Bridgend, and Bridgend have a team in the Premiership start. So I've got a local side there who I'll go and support and keep up to date if I'm not there. But I think the Premiership was around before the regions even come in, and that was Welsh rugby. You had the big teams like Neath, Swansea, Cardiff, Pontypridd, all these sides who everyone wanted to play for back in the day. And obviously now the regions come in and it's different. I think those clubs, and especially for fans and stuff as well, like they would prefer to go to their local club 5 minutes down the road than travel 20 minutes, half hour to watch regional rugby with a few internationals, yes, most of the time these days. you don't see half the internationals playing.
Do you think, Tobias, do you think that's actually because they won't travel, or is it because the way the regions were actually devised in the first place? Because it's quite an interesting, having lived through that time, about how the regions actually were created. At the time, we had the Celtic Warriors as well. It was very much not club or fan led. And I just wonder, from your point of view, what you think, why then that fans won't travel to see a region or have no affinity, perhaps, with a region?
Well, obviously, the club rugby, back, say the older generation, this would be their rugby. They'd go there week in, week out to watch the Premiership. But the regions now, obviously, 2003, I think they come in. 5 regions. I think we're going to talk more about the Celtic Warriors later, but I think the way they disbanded or liquidated themselves, I think, put down on the whole of Welsh rugby and just proved that the regions, well, not they weren't working, but maybe wasn't the right decision to start with. And I think a lot of people then would say, well, we'll stick with the Premiership. Like Celtic Warriors was Bridgend and Pontypridd, wasn't it, together as one. And all the Bridgend and Pontypridd fans then would want to watch the actual side play rather than watch this regional thing which didn't work out.
And you had blood feuds as well, didn't you? It was local derbies, and you were expecting them to be lumped into either the Dragons or the Blues, which was never going to be it was Newport Gwent Dragons. The Steelers and Newport, and it was always an easy bedfellows. What do you think, Nathan?
Well, I was just about to say, being from Ponty, I think everybody is widely known that Ponty despised the Blues. The fans despise the Blues. Many a time I've been in the shed down the years, and the song "I'll Never Be a Blue" will be rang out 3, 4, 5 times a game. And whenever we get a chance, to play Cardiff, is like we're taking on the region. It's like us against the world sort of thing. And I think that Celtic Warriors sort of disbanding has sort of had a big thing to do with that. I think I was looking at some stuff on Wales Online a few years back, and I think Cardiff and Ponty were talking about getting together when they were on about getting the Warriors together. And I think there was a big uproar about that as well. So I don't know how that would have gone down, but yeah, it worked with Ponty and Bridgend. They beat Wasps in the first season, and Wasps went on to win the European Cup that year. So they didn't do too bad, did they?
No, absolutely. It was interesting times, wasn't it? What's your take on it, Brandon?
Yeah, I think for me, my personal connection to it is my grandfather was a big Cardiff fan. And when the Blues came in, he was very sketchy about it, wasn't sure about it. I'm just about young enough to not fully grasp what it meant at the time, to being about 6 years old. And I am an Ospreys fan. It's painful at times, especially the past season, but, we'll get there. But I think, it has such deep roots in Welsh rugby. As Tobias said, that was Welsh rugby, and it continues to be Welsh rugby for a lot of people. A lot of people still will regularly go see their side play in the Premiership week in, week out, over go and see in the regions. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what people want to do, they support their team. And it's like me, I'm a Swansea football fan. It's like me saying, right, Swansea and Cardiff are going to become one team, and you need to go watch them now. It's very difficult to grasp that. Although, you might get the best of both worlds, 2 very good sides coming together. It's still not quite the same as being able to support the team. You maybe you're 60, 70 years old, go and see your team play, and you support them all your life for 60 years. And all of a sudden you're saying, actually, you're going to go to your main rivals, you're going to pull their fans where you've been singing abuse to them for 60 years, and you've got to work together. It was a massive thing in Wales at the time. And,
I think the WRU never actually grasped what the valleys mean. A valley, and then the next valley. In those days, you didn't. That was like on land almost. There wasn't that cultural. You had your communities, you had your valley. You travelled up and down a valley, but you very rarely travelled over. And I think that again was sort of not even, it didn't even come into the equation when they were debating how the regions would work.
Absolutely. Nathan, give us a quick plug for your podcast once again, just before you drop out of the studio. Any exciting plans for the next few shows? Let us know.
Yeah, so the next few weeks are Trevor Leota, Lewis Moody. Bloody hell. I book so many people, I just lose count. So I take it by the day. But yeah, it's going to be some really exciting stuff over the next few weeks. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
Absolutely. Don't Give a Ruck podcast. Check it out. And Tobias, finally from you, mate. Any exciting plans for the Welsh Premiership podcast and anything people should be looking out for?
Yeah, Friday coming up, we've got a new episode out with, I don't think we've announced it yet, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say. But very well-known big player in the Welsh Premiership and a son of a former Welsh coach. That might give it away, but...
Oh, okay. Sounds exciting. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll see you again on the podcast. Not on the podcast. I'm getting confused now. On the show very, very soon. Nathan, you scrambled my brains. They're gone. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. And we'll definitely catch up soon and get you on the show once again.
Cheers, guys.
See you soon. Ta-ra.
Cheers.
And there were two. There we go. Very interesting to talk about club rugby in Wales, how important the Premiership was. And as we said before, check out what them guys are doing, because they're doing some fantastic things, not just for Welsh rugby, but for rugby in general all around the world, and really giving fans an insight into what it might be like to be a professional rugby player. Because although I like to tell myself I was the new Shane Williams coming through growing up, I'm not, unfortunately. So although I like to tell myself that, I am not. We're going to welcome two new guests now. This might be quite interesting, actually, because we've got an Ospreys fan and we've got a Scarlets fan coming on. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm an Ospreys fan, and I'm really excited for this one. We're going to welcome both of them onto the show now. We're going to welcome them on. It is Bob and Daniel coming onto the show. Gentlemen, first off, we have Bob Gregory. Bob, I love the shirt, mate. It's absolutely beautiful. Welcome to the show. And Daniel, out and about on holiday. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Doing very well. The shirt is on, as you can tell.
Awesome.
As you can see,
walking to Aberystwyth.
I'm currently walking. Yeah, I'm on Halls. Staycation is the word of the summer, for obvious reasons. So I'm currently walking back to our little caravan here in West Wales.
Brilliant.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I mean, I'm going on holiday next week, so I cannot wait. Going to Anglesey on holiday, right on the beach. Going to relax a little bit. I do have a Warren Gatland's book to read, so that's something I'm going to crack on with. It's not that I miss him at all. I don't miss him at all, not one bit. But there we go. We're going to chat about the regions. We just talked about the Premiership, the importance of that. But of course, the regions came in 2004 into Wales with the 5 regions. Of course, we'll come to Bob first of all, and we'll talk about the Ospreys, the best team in Wales.
Yeah,
maybe about 10 years ago. Maybe about 10 years ago.
Best team in Wales. Let's look at the stats.
Bob, can you tell me a little bit about your links to the Ospreys? Were you a Neath fan beforehand and jumped over to the Ospreys, or are you new to the Ospreys? Oh, we got a clue. Explain away for us, mate.
Born in Neath, massive Neath fan. First game was Neath against Aberystwyth. It was always the first game of the season when the fair was on in Neath in September. And then, oh God, watched them for many, many years. Saw them under the Ayatollah when they were winning everything. And then I moved away and was watching it all from afar when Vernon Pugh turned the game professional in '95. And then 7 years later, the regions came around and, well, because there was no money. There was no money to pay loads and loads of players from loads and loads of clubs. Which is why clubs like Richmond went under. And so the regions came about. There was only ever going to be one region I could support, and that was the Neath and Swansea Ospreys. And the demise of Bridgend and Pontypridd coming together did us best of all, really, because nobody wanted to go to Cardiff. The Newport had been really well placed in the first season and then fell off as the money fell away. The Scarlets were Llanelli, they weren't going to change for anybody, and they've stayed the same. And we were the only region that were a real region. And so we incorporated everybody, whether they were from Bridgend or Tonmawr, from Swansea or the Gower, made no difference. You were part of Australia, and we had big gates then. And then, you know, we were playing in Swansea, down in St Helens, or we were playing occasionally at the Knoll. And then the Swans had their stadium built at Morfa, and we got in on that. And it's a great stadium, but it is a football stadium, and it's too big. And so we rattle around in there. But having said that, we had the players that have provided the bulk of the Welsh team throughout this third golden era. We've given our players to the Lions, and we've got 21 Lions from the Ospreys. And we're the only team to beat a touring team when we stuffed Australia as a region.
Absolutely. That's why we're Ospreys fans, and that's why this season has been extremely painful, to say the least. Yeah, just a little bit. Let's bring Daniel in. Can you explain a bit about your affiliation with the Scarlets and why they aren't as good as the Ospreys for me, please, mate?
Right, so it's ganging up on me. Okay,
I'm not ganging up.
Right, where do I start? Right, I'm Llanelli RFC fan first and foremost. First game was Neath, as it happens, back in, I think it was 89, 1990, around that time. In Stradey Park, in the old Stradey Park. I'm glad to say we won. You'll excuse me because I've absolutely bombed it back to the caravan and I'm out of breath because I'm so unfit. And I'm going in now. Here we go. Make sure it opens. Anyway, so yeah, and that was, as I say, back in the 90s. Fast forward, well, quite a few years, obviously, and then we became a region. I do disagree, of course, I do with Bob that they are the only region, because for me, yes, okay, Llanelli stayed as the only pro team back then, and you know, as a standalone with Cardiff, who became the Cardiff Blues. However, I do feel that a region encompasses the whole region of clubs that are in that county, that borough, that region, whatever you want to call it. So, you know, and rightly so. I think a few years back, the club decided to drop Llanelli. I'm a Llanelli boy. It didn't bother me so much. I know others, you know, supporters that it does bother. It didn't bother me because I did feel at that point we became that brand, the regional brand that you see now, which is the Scarlets, and does represent West Wales. You know, and it's great being here tonight in Pencanuck Holiday Park in deepest West Wales, as I say, in Ceredigion on the New Quay coastline. Seeing plenty of Scarlets, tops around, you get the odd Osprey. Obviously, he's a bit lost, but yeah, it's great. So yeah, you know, and that's my journey. A massive Scarlets fan. I worked a few years, as privilege and honour to work for the club for 5 seasons as well. Yeah, ymlaen Llanelli, ymlaen the Scarlets.
Absolutely, and the Scarlets have seen some great success. Not as good as the Ospreys, of course. It's just one of them things. Being an Ospreys fan, success just comes a lot of the time. But Bob, can you chat to me a little bit about the golden days? Because of course you remember the team. You remember Shane Williams. We had James Hook. We had Mike Phillips. We had all of them. He's even got the photo. We had an insane team. It was one of the best teams that we had. And
Mate, I tell you, from Stefan Terreblanche as a world-class fullback.
We've lost Daniel for a second, but I'm sure we'll get him back.
I'm back.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Hi, Daniel.
You could go through that squad that we had then, from Lyndon Bateman all the way down to Nicky Walker. It's full of internationals, full of quality star players, up to Richie well, Barry Williams, Sonny Parker, the bulk of the Welsh team that have done so well and laid the foundations for Warren Gatland and his team all came from the Ospreys. Now, granted, they did very well out of the demise of the Bridgend debacle, but somebody had to, and it just turned out that it was us.
Perfect. And the Ospreys were so successful, and of course, there was a lot of talk at the time where coaches were picking like 13 Ospreys. He is one of the the Ospreys were so successful at the time, and people were like, wait, but isn't it to represent the 4 regions? Let's go over to Daniel now to chat a bit about the Scarlets. Of course, Scarlets over the past 5 years, I've seen a good amount of success and played. As an Ospreys fan, I hate to say it, but I will say it. I've played some really good rugby. I've played really attractive rugby. It must have been some great memories over the last 5-6 years down at Parker Scarlets for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a great 5 or 6 years, as you say, Brandon. And we were a little bit slow off the mark when regionalisation came in, but I think that we've certainly made up for it in the last few years, as you say. Yeah, fantastic memories. I mean, the couple of visits we had to the well, actually more than a couple, to Dublin for the semis and the final twice. Were good memories. Unfortunately, on the second occasion we lost out there, but to a very, very good Leinster side. But yeah, in recent years, we've played rugby, and I think that's important for the Scarlets as well. Is that it's not only winning, which of course is everything in rugby, but it's the brand of rugby that they play, and in fairness that they've continued to play. We've always gone for a coach that likes that style, very similar to Swansea City, perhaps not so much in recent years, but in that they try to keep that continuity of the coaching and staff, so that obviously you keep that brand of rugby or brand of football in the Swans case going forward. But yeah, highlight for me in the last few years certainly would be that final in Dublin, playing Munster in 2017 to win the Pro 12 as it was then. And probably only Eclipse by the week before beating Leinster in the semi-final with 14 men in the second half. So yeah, some great memories.
Absolutely.
What do you think of Fitzpatrick?
Go on, sorry, Rhian.
Yeah, it's a bit left field. I'll be honest, Rhian didn't expect that. I've been out the club now on the staff at least for the last 18 months. So yeah, that was very, very surprising. As a player, there's no one more revered or well known in world rugby. He's an absolute living legend. As an All Black captain. But yeah, so what he can bring to it, I'm hoping that he can certainly open some doors. If you're a player that's deciding between 2 Pro 14 clubs or maybe Harlequin, Saracens, but you're coming over from the Southern Hemisphere and Sean Fitzpatrick is with the Scarlets, then I'm inclined to say that those players are probably going to sign for us based on that. If everything else is the same in terms of the salary and things. But so yeah, it's good. What'll come of it, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Now, I've been looking at our private chat here in the corner, and Joe's been pinging me some messages. So I'm just going to read whatever he's told me to read. So this could be interesting or not. But this is actually, yeah, it's a comment from Joe Lyons. He says, surely the Welsh Rugby Union should have realised that Welsh Rugby is extremely localised and generational. Merging teams very rarely works. Very sad when teams are watered down. I want to get your thoughts on that. We have spoken a little bit about the creation of the regions. If we go to Bob first, what are your thoughts on that Welsh Rugby, is it too local? Are people too tribal in a sense that they can't go over? Because, again, I think most fans, you'd say, did go over to the Ospreys, did go over to Scarlets, did go over to Cardiff Blues, went over to the Dragons. I'm not saying that any of you are much older than me, because you're not, obviously, but you would, of course, remember the transition a lot more than I did. Bob, what are your thoughts?
It was David Moffat who brought in the regions, having looked over the water to see what the Irish guys were doing and how successful they had been. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think he understood about the tribal mentality or the club mentality. But the other side of that is he did understand money. And in a professional game, we couldn't afford it. And so something had to change. Now, you could have cut down the number of clubs in the Premiership and made that try to work, but who are you going to get rid of? So to have a new start, albeit Llanelli and Cardiff stayed the same pretty much. Newport was stuffed and became the Newport Gwent Dragons, and the oldest club in the country had to suck it up and go with Swansea. But that turned out to be quite successful. So at the time when it all happened, I think all 5 regions were getting decent gates. I certainly know that we were, even though it was down at St Helens or at the Knoll. But even when we would go to the Liberty to start off with, the gates were pretty good still, getting in a lot of people from, as we call it, Australia. That's fallen off quite considerably because we're not getting the success that we had. It's certainly gone up for the Scarlets, as they've been playing some fabulous rugby over the last, well, through PVAC's era. And it'll be interesting, I think, now to see with the massive amount of cash injection for the Dragons and their huge recruiting policy, how that will affect them, because they've had rubbish gates as well. Cardiff have just been ticking over because it's in the middle of the city, and you know, if you've got nothing else to do, you go and watch paint dry or see the Blues.
Exactly. And we do have a really interesting comment coming up. I think Rhian's going to take this one because I think you're more connected to it than I am. I think Joe's going to put it up for us now regarding the Scarlets.
Yeah, and obviously the passing of Tomo recently. I met him a few times. He was a really great guy, and I just, you know, he was the voice of the Scarlets, wasn't he? He also did football commentary, but he was the commentator on match day. And every time I went to, whether it was, you know, Parker Scarlets or Stratty, he was there and a larger than life character. And just a few thoughts, Daniel. I don't know whether you worked with him when you were with the Scarlets.
Yeah, I certainly did, Rhian. It's extremely sad, you know, for a chap to pass away at 53 years old. Obviously leaving the family, young family as well behind is terrible. And you know, I think the whole region is still in shock. Those that worked with him, I was very lucky again to work with Tomo. I was in his not the funeral, but the sort of celebration service then beforehand, and that's what it was, a celebration of Tomo's life on Saturday in Cardigan up here. And yeah, it was fantastic to see so many people, socially distant than my dad, in a massive field on the football rugby pitch. Yeah, he, as you say, he was a voice of the Scarlets. Welsh rugby, Welsh sport, as you say, he did both. I've lost an absolute genuine person, and just a great guy, just really great guy, you know.
It reminds me of when Grav went. You know, he was another one, wasn't he? He was also Mr. Llanelli and Scarlets.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He just oozed Llanelli, oozed Scarlet, oozed Wales. You know, he was there's no words that a mere mortal like me could provide that would describe Grav's prowess amongst
I think you described it very well.
And I think, you know, that's the beauty of Welsh rugby. We have these characters in the game who come and represent what we're all about, passion, about everyone's invited to come and support the team and get involved. Just before you go, gentlemen, I do want to get your thoughts on the current situation of your sides. Obviously, Bob, me and you both, very painful season, but maybe some signs of some improvements with some signings coming in. Could you quickly, in maybe a minute or so, give your thoughts on the current situation of the Ospreys and how are we to move forward?
Okay, we've got Toby Booth has come in now, and things are changing. The next 2 games are really important for you and for me, and they mean absolutely nothing in reality. It's all about next season. You can forget this one, you know, COVID and everything else that's gone on make it absolutely meaningless. We lost most of our team, as did the Scarlets, to the Rugby World Cup and the Six Nations, constantly being drained there. And so they're not turning up for the Ospreys games. But next year, and let's be honest, we're at the bottom. There's only one way for us to go now.
Exactly. Daniel, your thoughts on the Scarlets? How are things looking down at Parker Scarlets at the minute for you guys?
No, we've had a good couple of seasons. We've had some changes in the coaching setup. It was obviously a big blow to lose our current coach Brad, who's gone on to greater things with New Zealand, of course, back down under. So yeah, that's going to be a little bit disruptive. But he's got his number 2 coming in to give him a hand in Glenn Delaney. So he's taken the shoes for hopefully a bit of continuity there, Brandon. But yeah, look, the club's in good health, good shape at the moment, on the field, off the field. COVID, as obviously Bob mentioned, though, is going to have a big impact, and if it hasn't already. One thing for me, and in fairness, Bob touched on with the World Cup, is that we haven't seen our regional players in best part of 90% of the year, if not higher than that, actually, probably 95% of games. It'd be fantastic to see them, week in, week out when things start back again. And my big bugbear with Welsh Rugby is that we don't perhaps follow the football mode, in that when we play international rugby, all our league fixtures continue. Whereas, you're obviously myself and Bob, big regional rugby fans, and supporting the Ospreys and Scarlets, and we want to see the players that have these big, massive Twitter announcements signing up, and your Jonathan Davises and in fairness, they're playing for the international team, but as season ticket holders, we'd like to see them play in, and that's one of my biggest bugbears, really.
And that's going to get the fans down. Rhian, you're Dragons fans. A tough few years, but over the past year or so,
I'm so
for the past year, I've been so impressed with what you've done. You took Sam Davis over, of course, from the Ospreys. Some big signings, obviously. Dr. Jamie Roberts has joined. Can you give me your thoughts on the Dragons? Where you are at the minute?
I'm just so excited for next season. I think they've slowly been consolidating. It's taken a long time, but as they've improved, as you said, Brandon, they're getting their act together. They're making some decent signings, and I just really hope they gel. It all gels for them, because it's been, they really have been the Cinderella. It's like, being a Dragons fan, just on some of the forums, it's just been so hard having to put up with all the hassle. But yeah, really excited for next season, and can't wait for the end of it. A bit of rugby now. I think we've all got all hoping that what's happening with the French players doesn't translate over here, and then we can at least have a few games before the end of the season, so we can have a bit of rugby to watch, because I think we're all missing it big time. I would say that we have asked both Cardiff Blues and Dragons for representatives from their perspective, because Daniel and Bob haven't had the opportunity yet, really, to mention your forums. Because you are both representing the Ospreys and the Scarlets supporters forums, and we're all about promoting those. So if either of you want to say a word about your forums, or both of you, start with Bob.
No, start with Daniel.
Okay, Daniel.
In fairness, I float very much in and out of the forums. I say a few things here and there, and good friend of mine, Jonathan Smith, suggested that I come up and speak all things this evening, Rhian, and I think I owe him perhaps a little bit more engagement in the forum than I have done previously. So I shall do that.
That's all good, mate. And yourself, Bob, tell us a bit about your forum and why people should be following the Ospreys more than the Scarlets.
Yeah, I'm desperately trying to find the name of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's easy. Scarlet supporters.
It's something like that. Anne Taylor runs it, and she's brilliant. And it's just about, as it is with Daniel now, it's just fans who are passionate about the club, who want to see him do well. And I'm not speaking for Daniel, but I think he's probably a sound bloke. But nobody wants to see any of the Welsh regions do badly. We want to see us all get in and achieving.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Apart from Blues, obviously.
100%. Yeah.
But it's not about idiots. football fans who are trying to slag everybody off. I'm not interested in that. It's about genuine fans who want to see success for everyone in Wales.
Exactly. And all 4 regions work together to try and get, I think, the national team to be as successful as possible. They are the feeder teams. That's why, as we've spoken throughout the show, from grassroots all the way up to the national side, there is a system that seems on the whole to work, where players can go through, they may join the academy of a region, not get enough game time, so they join a Premiership side, they get game time there, they develop, they start playing for the region week in, week out in the Pro 14 or in Europe, they get recognised, they then go up to the national team and then hopefully go on to the Lions. Just before you go, lads, I do want to ask you a little bit about the passion that we have for rugby here in Wales. If you could summarise very quickly for me, what does rugby mean to us here in Wales? Why is it so important? Why is it so integral to us? And and what it means to you personally as well. Let's go to the Scarlets fan first. Let's go to Daniel.
Thank you for that, Brandon. On the spot. I just feel that for me personally, it's all about socially connecting. My very brief rugby days ended at youth level, and many would say that was too long. So but I've been a supporter ever since, and I'm probably a little bit better at supporting than I was at playing. But like I said, and that if it wasn't such a fantastic social gathering, I'm sure that perhaps 80% of people wouldn't follow it. But we all love the game. But for me, it's all about the social and getting together, and of course, the most important thing in Wales, the singing.
Oh, brilliant! It's so good. When you hear that glad in the stadium, it just blows you away.
Want to sing there, Daniel? Next show.
Sorry, Rhian.
I said the next show you're singing.
Oh, no. I could possibly Hyde.
You do not want to hear me sing. I can promise. You do not want to hear me sing. That streak will end very, very quickly. I can promise you if I start singing, because it will not be pretty. Darren Powell with Ospreys. There's a little comment there, of course. What else? Bob, can you tell me a little bit about, of course, your passion for rugby and the passion we have for rugby here in Wales?
It's as Daniel said, it's not just about the game, it's the whole ethos that surrounds it. It's everything. It is absolutely everything. When that ball is kicked, usually by Dan Bigger superbly, to start the match, you can forget absolutely everything else. And I have been so lucky with rugby, because as you were the next Shane Williams, I was going to be the next Gareth Llewellyn. Not. And as a consequence of that, I have been lucky enough to go all over the world and watch Wales play, and the Ospreys, and the friends that we've made. Absolutely phenomenal, just through watching 30 blokes mess about with a pig's bladder. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
It is, and that's what I think in Wales we have, that mentality. We're all in this together. We're a small nation, but what we've achieved over the last 15, 20 years, which we'll get to in just a sec, has been phenomenal. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Daniel, enjoy the rest of your holiday. Bob, have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Check out their forums. We want to get involved with you guys. We want to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you, Bob.
Daniel.
Take care.
Bye.
There we go. There's just the two of us.
That hour has gone so fast.
It has. It has indeed. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We're quickly going to finish by just talking a little bit about the success of the last 15 to 20 years. I think for me, the biggest real success we saw was after 2007. Of course, we lost to Fiji. I'm completely over it. And I think that was a real time for change for Welsh rugby. And we saw Gatland come in. And of course, we were losing to England at half time in Twickenham. We thought we weren't going to do it, but we came back and won. Rhian, can you really summarise the impact that Gatland had over his tenure here, and how you think Wales became such a solid team, where we were regularly beating the likes of Australia, South Africa at some points, winning Grand Slams, Six Nations? What do you think that was down to? Why do you think we saw such success?
I think what Gatland did was instilled the team ethos. that those guys were out for each other and, you know, taking them off. He sort of started with taking them off or yomping up Himalayas and doing those cryo baths and things like that. But it was all about being there for the last man, wasn't it? You know, it was perhaps a different mentality because I think Welsh players, the flair of the 1970s and things like that, you know, and when we gone through phases of playing percentage rugby, it's hit and miss. But what he did was made them just look after each other, and I think that the strength of being there for so long, you know, it was an unprecedented tour of duty with Gats, and I personally am a Gats fan, particularly when everyone goes on about Warren Ball or Gatlin Ball, but actually it was 2017 when that sort of started. He phased that one out, or he was phasing that out. So I just think, and I hope now that, you know, I think what's happened in the Six Nations, the pre-virus Six Nations, is that that Pivac, you can see what he wants to do, but the players are not quite gelling into their new roles. But I think that's to come. You don't have a world-class team that suddenly goes to nothing, and hopefully next season again, we'll be back there.
Exactly. And, you know, the success over the last 10 years has been incredible. Been very fortunate to see it. And with Pivac, it's just going to take time. That's all we got time for today. I do want to plug one show coming very, very shortly on Wednesday. This Wednesday coming. It's a really exciting show with Three Blokes, Ball and a Bod, hosted by your chief bloke, Joe Shep, of course. He's going to be hosting a concussion special. I believe Nathan's going to be there, who's on the show today, talking about how concussion is such a big issue in rugby and how maybe World Rugby does need to approach that. That's going to be a fantastic show, isn't it, Rhian?
Absolutely. Looking forward to that one. Huge issue for us in Wales, particularly. Really exciting. And we'll be back in a month. And we want to know what you want. You know, this show is here to be led by you. We started some discussions today. We need to spend more time on some of these subjects, and I can't wait for that. You know, you sometimes just start things and you think, no, we have to stop because this is a broad church for the show. But we've got some great ideas. And as I said, if anyone has any ideas, if anyone wants to come on the show with us, then just drop us a line on our Facebook page and we'll get back to you. Brilliant.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's what we're all about. We want the fans to get involved, to let us know what's concerning them about Welsh Rugby, what they're excited about. And thank you so much for watching. It's our first show. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, like our Facebook page, like the stream, share the stream with your friends, with your rugby friends. It's been really great fun today. Rhian, thank you so much for helping me with this one. Absolutely. Could not have done it without you, and you've got the beauty, you know, to get the fact. I don't have that, so
you've got the youth.
So thank you so much, guys, for watching. We really appreciate it, and make sure Wednesday show 8:30 on the Three Blokes page, a concussion special hosted by Big Joe Shep. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon here on the Welsh Rugby Roundup show, the Dragons Balls.
Bye. Your star.